A very uncomfortable anecdote in the Venezuelan Llanos. So my father owns a cattle ranch in Los Llanos of Apure. Los Llanos is a huge region of grasslands or Great Plains, flat lands without any hills and few trees, located in Colombia and Venezuela. In these extensive lands the population is scarce, only a few more live in this region than in the neighboring Amazon jungle at the south, almost unexplored. So as you may expect, the Llanos is a land where superstition is as natural as common sense. Superstition is something embodied intrinsically in the people of this region. My father inherited the land from my grandmother who moved to the city, gave him birth and never took much care about the ranch. But my dad, on the late 70s and 80s, begun the cattle business and took care of it, traveling once a month from Caracas to the ranch, a 10 hours drive. I went with him in some of those trips. Even though our family comes from this place, we cannot call ourselves true Llaneros, which are like some sort of cowboy, or how you would simply call the people from the Llanos. So, you could say we are not superstitious at all, my father the least of all people I know. But of course, traveling so much there, you get familiar with the local folklore, not only music and cuisine, but also, the tales, sightings and anecdotes. So, the tales. Tales like Florentino y el Diablo, Florentino being a very poor but very brave Llanero and El Diablo being, well, I don't have to translate that. Florentino is going to a party, or leaving the party, I don't recall the story precisely, but anyhow it is by night and he's walking alone, through the darkness of this Great Plains, when he realizes a man cloaked in black is following him, so he decides to face the man, only to realize that it is the devil. And the devil challenge him to a duel of composing rhymes, but like singing, in the Llanero's way. So in the end, after a very tyranning and long duel, Florentino manages to summon the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit, without saying their names, and cast the devil back to the hell where it belongs. This was originally a poem, then a song and eventually a tale. Then there's the tale of El Silban or the Whistler. So if you are wandering at night through the Llano you could hear a whistle. A high pitch of the whistle means that El Silban is far, but a very low or faint whistle would mean El Silban coming for you, then you must hurry your way back home. If he gets you, he kills you by hitting you with a sack that seems to have rocks and sticks inside. The story is that El Silban was a furious man who killed both his parents, but after the crime he stumbled with a rock and broke his neck with a V-shaped tree. So he's denied his entrance in hell, therefore he's doomed to walk the savannah carrying the bones of his parents in a sack, tormenting those who wander the Llano by night. Mostly men, and most of them, mischievous and unfaithful men, of course. There was the sightings. These are particularly my favorite stories because they were always told as an original one. Inverted question mark, you know, I saw the fireball the other night, someone would say. The fireball is a very common story and it refers, literally, to a fireball that travels very low and at very high speed until it is extinguished. So a treasure of a dead man was buried near the place where the fire disappeared and one must look for it. I still don't know the first person who had found one. My grandmother, apart from seeing the fireball a number of times, no treasure found, had a very cool story. It was the early 30s, she was at her teens in the ranch where she was born, El Hato La Paz. One night she was with her sisters, Petra and Eulalia, lying on the porch of the house after dinner when they heard gunshots and screams. The Matayur River ran some meters behind the house and the screams seemed to come from that direction. They hid in the house and through a window they saw a black wagon pulled by a black horse, and in the wagon a couple of men firing shots to a larger group of men that were chasing them, all of them armed with musketry. Several battles of the Venezuelan War of Independence were fought in Los Llanos, so you can figure. My granduncle Gustavo claimed he once had to stop his Toyota Land Cruiser in the middle of a dirt road, at night, when a giant black dog blocked his way and showed no sign of moving, even after he honked several times. So he pulls out a shotgun that usually carried below his seat, convincing himself that this is a Florentine-esque situation in which he will face the devil, or some sort of devil. It was too big for a dog, only a few inches smaller than a cow, It was not a normal animal and I wasn't drunk, he said. At all time he locked eye contact with the beast, and when he finally opened the door and jumped out of the SUV, the animal was gone. Gone as if it were printed in the inner windshield, but outside there was nothing. So you don't know if these sightings are told as tales, because they tell them so vehemently and so convinced, they would feel offended if you don't believe them. And then, there are the anecdotes, which for me are the worst kind of stories because most of them doesn't have a resolution and people don't go telling them, they suffer them, and most of them are inexplicable. My grandma had some old dispute with a cousin of hers, over a stolen boyfriend during their youth, and then, for the land she inherited, the cousin complained there was some favoritism over grandma and that she got the worst lands. Anyhow, when grandma got old, she returned to the Llano and expended some seasons in the ranch, and some nights alone, by herself, while the ranch caretakers were at the town. Eventually, grandma told my dad that, when she was alone at night she felt an entity touching her in the face, like a poke. Also screams of insults that seemed to come out of nowhere. And sometimes, she heard this entity breaking her glass stuff in the kitchen. But she wouldn't get out of the hammock. In the ranch there are no beds, we sleep on hammocks like the old school. The next morning she would find the mess in the kitchen. She learned, by some gossip, that this cousin of hers was into some sort of revengeful Llano witchcraft or voodoo, like a Southern Santeria or Palo, who knows what. My father, being the most practical, pragmatic and atheist man, always discouraged the idea. This were nightmares, and I as young boy only wondered, who could it be? The caretakers? There was a good relationship with them. Someone sent by this old revengeful cousin? Well, it could be, but there's no way they could have entered the house, because in Llano, we do not lock the doors only, we barricade the doors with a metal bar and the windows have iron bars as well. So all of this was uncomfortable and unresoluted. My grandma decided not to spend more time alone in the ranch. So we come to my anecdote. I was 15 or something like that, and it was Holy Week. I went to the ranch with my dad and grandma. Mom stayed home with my two younger siblings. It was a nice trip because Dad had more days, usually he went in a rush, and stayed for a couple of nights only. This time we had 5 nights, so there was time for some horse riding and smoking, except of course on Holy Friday, because you should never eat meat on a Holy Friday, the day Jesus got crucified, nor ride a horse, nor make a trip. I failed at the second rule. I love horse riding and I did it every day. Funny thing is, on that Holy Friday I went racing the horse through the savannah by myself and I guided the animal to cross what I think it was non-deep pond, when the animal suddenly stops and I fell from the horse, directly into the water. It wasn't very deep, but the horse, Ron was his name, after the liquor rum, got scared by a bubba, a small crocodile of those that can't kill you, but might eat your hand or a foot, dangerous enough. As soon as I saw the bubba a few meters from me, I ran out of the lagoon chasing Ron until the animal stopped and I was able to climb back on it. I don't think the bubba was after me, I think it got scared by Ron as well, but I didn't stop to check it. So a strange thing happened right afterwards. I continued my ride through the Llano when I found a cow carcass, very old. The bones were white already and there was no rotted skin attached to it. The horse stopped again as soon as it saw the carcass and refused to get any closer. I dismounted and took the skull. I thought of bringing it back to the house and maybe take one of the horns with me to Caracas. I took the skull, but Ron, a very passive horse, refused to allow me to climb back on him. Later the caretakers would tell me that live animals don't like dead animal at all. I didn't know that. Anyhow, I had to return to the house walking and pulling Ron by the rope. The night in the Llano is something unique. At dusk, in those Great Plains, you can face west and stare directly into the sun without burning your eyes. The sun turns to a vivid orange color and its shape changes, not a circle anymore, but some sort of ghostly diamond, and it vibrates faintly as a mirage. Some minutes later, if there are no clouds, you will see the best sky of your life. The sky would appear like the dome of a planetarium and you will be able to see stars even in the horizon. It is truly a very Garcia Marquez experience. You can feel so lonely, but not in a bad way, more like in a primitive way, and you can admire the beauty of nature. That Holy Friday night, the sky was cloudy. No moon, no stars, so the darkness was complete. At nights like that, you cannot see your own hand when all lights are out. I must clarify that the nearest house, the neighboring ranch of La Barbada, my Grand-Aunt Peter's place, is located at a 2 kilometers distance, so you see no lights. Everything is complete darkness. The three of us were in the big shared bedroom, sleeping in the hammocks. Actually, I was the only one sleeping in a hammock. My dad and my grandma were sleeping in chincros, which are hammocks made of fishing nets, the way the natives of my country are used to sleep. The main difference between a hammock and a chincro is that, in the chincro you can look outside, while in the hammock its fabric doesn't allow you to look outside. Once you're lying in it, you only see the ceiling. This fact is important for the rest of the anecdote. At night, my grandma leaves a lit candle on the floor, so in case you want to go to the bathroom at night, you don't hit the ropes of the chincros or hammocks. So I was having a hard time falling asleep, no particular reason, maybe the bubba or the cow carcass had some impression in me. I could hear my dad sleeping when suddenly, at my feet's left, I heard someone moving paper sheets, like checking documents, passing pages, crumpling paper sheets, tearing it, passing it, again and again. I thought that, maybe, my grandma was doing something because the noise came from her dresser with mirror, right next to my feet. So, fearing my dad would be wakened by this noise, I begun calling, or more like whispering, "Grandma? Grandma? What are you doing?" No answer. I couldn't see without rising from the hammock. The noise continued all the same. "Grandma, Dad's gonna be mad," I whispered. Still no answer. So I incorporated rapidly to find that there was no one there, and the noise ended abruptly the moment my head got out of the hammock. The fear got into me like an unnatural coldness of this warm region. The lugubrious candle lit up the room as I looked to other side. My dad was sleeping in his chincro and my grandma, behind him, sleeping in hers, both of them, unaware of the noise. What was it? Who was it? I kept thinking, and finally, I decided to lay down again. The moment I went again into that canyon made by the hammock's fabric, the noise resumed vigorously, but this time, next to my left ear, as if to annoy me. I grinded my teeth in panic and covered the half of my face with the light pillow I used to sleep, so I breathed with my mouth and pressed the pillow strongly against my eyes and my ears, and I begun to pray as hard as I could, whispering, hearing myself into my head, and in that way, avoiding the noise of the paper sheets passing, tearing, crumpling again, and again until I finally exhausted myself. Next day, Dad and I went horse riding with the caretakers, herding the cattle to the corral. Dad asked about my face, asked if I've got some sleep. I was reluctant to tell him what happened, fearing he would reject the anecdote as a nightmare or something I could have imagined. But I ended telling him everything. He heard it all without interrupting, and in the end he only said, "Well, you know, your Grand-Aunt Pastora once heard exactly the same thing, a noise of paper sheets being passed, ripped and crumpled. It's curious. I know it's not a horrifying story, but it sure scared me enough. When I get to tell real anecdotes of this sort with friends, I always tell this one. Luckily, never again I heard something like that, never again I saw anything unnatural that I can remember now. I still have questions, of course, but the fear of those damn papers, I will never forget and keeps me away from intending to find an answer."